NBC News legal analyst Misty Marris is here to break down the latest on two separate federal court hearings yesterday related to what is being called Operation Metro Surge in Minneapolis. Misty, thanks for being here. So let's start on this one that's aim is really at getting less agents on the streets. As Julia just said, yesterday a federal judge had heard some of these arguments. This is in the suit brought by Minnesota and the Twin Cities against DHS. This was after the death of Renee Good. The Justice Department has until tomorrow to respond on this. But how is the state making their argument that this operation violates the Constitution, they're saying, and that immediately, as soon as possible, less agents need to be on the street?
So it's important to know the legal standard. So what they need to show is that there would be irreparable harm if this continues, obviously pointing to these contentious and sometimes deadly interactions. And then the other piece is likelihood of success on the merits, so the underlying constitutional issues. Now, within the president's constitutional powers, this is a federal law enforcement operation. So in general, the federal government would control. The states would not be able to have any say in how this type of action is actually executed. But what the states are arguing is that it's not a lawful law enforcement enforcement action because it's actually being used in retaliation and coercion by the federal government for Minnesota to get rid of their sanctuary city policy. So that is the core of the argument and what we heard play out in court yesterday.
Let's dig a little deeper into their argument. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison spoke to reporters. Let's hear some of what he said. We'll talk about it on the other side.
The president has been clear. We didn't vote for him. So he was really salty about that. This is not about fraud, and it's not even about immigration, and it's certainly not about law enforcement. It's about handing over documents of the state of Minnesota, private information, including voting information, to the federal government. That's what this is about.
So those are some pretty serious allegations from the AG there. Does the evidence that you've seen so far in their arguments back up those claims?
So interestingly enough, the judge was really focused on some of what evidence was presented that's at the core of that argument, specifically pointing to a letter that Pam Bondi sent to Tim Walz over the weekend, setting forth conditions for removal of ICE agents from Minnesota. Those conditions included getting rid of sanctuary city policies. They included turning over voter rolls. They also included turning over welfare information, which would be at the court of a fraud investigation. So all of that was something the judge focused on, and what the government will have to answer for tomorrow when we see that filing as to why are these the conditions if this is truly just a law enforcement operation relating to immigration.
Okay, now let's talk about this other one. This is at the scene of Alex Pretti's shooting and destroying evidence. I'll give you some details here. On Saturday, a federal judge issued an order blocking the Trump administration from destroying or altering evidence here. Minnesota officials had raised concerns after the state agency that normally would investigate all law enforcement shootings there in the state. They were denied access to this crime scene twice by federal agents. And here's the kicker. I mean, they had a warrant. At a hearing yesterday, a lawyer for the Trump administration had assured the judge that they are preserving that evidence, didn't make any promises, though, to share any of it with Minnesota officials. First of all, I mean, just tell us how unusual everything is that I just laid out there. And also, how is the state trying to make the case that the way this whole investigation is being handled by the federal government has essentially been compromised?
Yeah, so the first point is, in general, when you have an excessive force case like this, you would have a joint investigation between the federal government and the state government, or the state investigators, and that would be done together collaboratively, so you have this independent investigation. So what was used by the state prosecutors yesterday to establish that there needs to be a court order to ensure that evidence isn't being destroyed, number one, public statements made by high-level officials like Kristi Noem that were drawing conclusions about this before an investigation was even conducted. In addition, anomalies in the way that the federal investigation was playing out. For instance, Homeland Security investigators are the ones who are spearheading this, even though it's a Border Patrol agent. They fall underneath the same umbrella, so that's a conflict of interest. So that was raised as well. Normally, this would be turned over to the FBI. So these deviations from usual practices were used as the reason why the federal government, who's already obligated to preserve this evidence, needs a court order to back that up.
All right, Misty Marris, as always, we appreciate you. Thank you.